Shall we go ahead and get started, Shekhar?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Greetings and namaste to all of you from Indian Finance Academy, San Diego. Today is our third consecutive week of listening to Sri Krishnan about one of the greatest Tamil composers in Carnatic music, Sri Gopala Bharathi. A heartfelt thank you to all of you for attending, and let us sincerely pray for the world to cure itself of COVID and heal real soon. When I think of Sangita Acharya Shri TSR Krishnan, many wonderful things come to mind. That he is an amazing musician, Harikatha and Sankirtanam exponent, one who not only is well versed in scriptures but lives by them, legal expert, awesome storehouse of information, etc., etc. But what really makes him stand out is the absolutely awesome giver that he is. He's always available for any and every cultural cause that we reach out to him about. He's a dear friend and coach of Indian Finance Academy, and we bow down to his service. Today, he will be continuing his spellbinding account of Sri Gopala Bharati's virtuous yogic spiritual life as a composer and his magnum opus Nandanar Charitram. When we think of the 3 consecutive weeks of bliss we have had, I'm sure you would all agree that it's a hat trick, just like San Diego is. San Diego has the most gorgeous surroundings with both beaches and hills, absolutely divine weather, and seriously friendly people. Like icing on the cake, San Diego is also home to Indian Finance Academy San Diego, making it extra special. My name is Revathi Subramanian, and I'm one of the managing trustees of Indian Finance Academy, San Diego. Since we started the academy in September 2007, we have brought exceptional Indian music and dance concerts to performing arts lovers in North America. Since the beginning of the academy, we have staged over 225 concerts of Carnatic and Hindustani, vocal and instrumental music, various dance forms, and lecture demonstrations, and have held outstanding annual festivals for 12 consecutive years. Indian Finance Academy is managed by a board of 19 music lovers, led extremely effectively by our president and secretary, Dr. Shekhar Vishwanathan, whose skills in appreciating performing arts, organizing classy events, and bringing together music lovers from North and South India are legendary. The organization thrives with the dedicated support of hundreds of volunteers we are deeply indebted to. When I think of COVID, I'm reminded of what Martin Luther King Jr. once said: only in the darkness can you see the stars. Along with the incredible woes, COVID has brought us all together from all over the world and allowed us to have these wonderful online interactions with amazing artists of today. We have been so lucky to be part of these awesome interactions. We have had conversations with phenomenal artists and completed a year of this series just a couple of weeks ago. I am sure you will agree that these sessions have left indelible marks on our music experience journey. With me today is San Diego's Rasika Shiromani, esteemed vocal guru, our Indian Finance Academy trustee, a scientist who has inspired young and old minds to appreciate classical music in San Diego, Dr. C.M. Venkatachalam. I would like to invite Dr. Venkatachalam to introduce the artist for the evening. This is a 3-part series, and today's session is session number 3. All 3 sessions are available on our Facebook page. Don't miss them. Please mute your session and turn your video off. This will improve the quality of the session. Please feel free to type questions in the chat window, and we will certainly take them up today. Thanks again, and over to Dr. Venkatachalam.
Namaskaram. Thank you, Revathi. Sangita Acharya Krishnan, a Carnatic musician, a superb exponent of Sankirtanam and Harikatha tradition, a erudite scholar, encyclopedic knowledge, a professional in international banking and fiduciary, a trusted advisor to Indian Finance Academy of San Diego. His work is a lifelong enterprise. If we try to go to libraries, amass books, to enable us to understand all the facts and backgrounds and analysis Sri Krishna provides in these lectures, it will be a formidable task. It is made very, very easy now by Indian Fine Arts Academy, and with the kindness of Sri Krishnan, that we are having today the third lecture. In the first lecture, he presented the historical background where Gopala Krishna Bharati thrived. In part two, he presented an analysis and appreciation of several of his works. These have been phenomenal presentations, beautifully done. The recordings available will show you clearly what we mean by that. This lecture today, as Revati mentioned, the magnum opus Nandana Charitram. With immense anticipation, I request Sri Krishnan to start his presentation. Sri Krishnan.
Namaskaram and felicitations to the patrons of Indian Fine Arts Academy, the Board of Trustees, and the distinguished musicians who are dialing from North America and various overseas locations. This is the third and final session on Gopala Krishna Bharati's contributions to the society at large and Karnataka Sangeetam in particular. Nandana Charitram is a very interesting opera for many reasons. Let us see the genesis, how it all came about. Bharathi enjoyed meditating in the hall outside the Nritta Sabha in Chidambaram and often went into trance, singing beside the Nandanar statue positioned facing the Sanctum Sanctorum. In one such occasion, a group of Bharati's admirers requested him to sing a song, imagining as though Nandanar would be singing to his Lord Nataraja if he were positioned there. Instantly came about the great song Enneramum Mundan Sannidhiyile, which we saw in the last session, which Dr. Uve Swaminathan Uvesa had mentioned in his book as set to Arabi Raga. The publications that came after 1952 mentioned differently, since musicians at around that time had popularized this song and by then have made this to become a Devagandhari Kriti. We will now see how Nandan was portrayed by Bharati. Barring a laconic account of Nandan in Periya Puranam, in other words, a very concise to the point of being cryptic or rude or mysterious, that is the nature of anecdote of Nandan in Periya Puranam. There was neither an interesting legend nor an interesting drama in Sekirar's short synopsis. Sekirar, as many of you may know, belonged to the 12th century. He compiled and wrote the Periya Puranam, the life stories of the 63 Shaiva Nayanmars or Nayanars, devotees of Lord Shiva, many of whom contributed or composed the liturgical poems of the Tirumurai. We call it Tirumurai or Tirumarai. 12-volume compendium of sacred hymns on Lord Shiva. Sekirar himself was canonized as a Nayanar and the work became part of the sacred canon. Among all the hagiographic Puranas in Tamil, Sekirar's Periya Puranam, also known as Tiruttondar Puranam, which was composed around the time of Kulothunga Chola, second Kulothunga Chola, that stands foremost. And Kulothunga Chola belonged to the 12th century, middle of 12th century. It was the genius of Bharathi that produced this great opera in Tamil, reflecting Bharati's intense observation of the rural socio-economic landscape of times and his deep-rooted malaise of divisions in society, and also the blending of his enormous creativity with spiritual fragrance and musical innovation, so that immediately it can appeal to people who are listening to this music. At this stage, I feel that my duty is to be objective and less emotional about Gopala Krishna Bharathi and his great Nandan. If I claim that I have done some research, I have to be very honorable and truthful to give different colors of the story. Bharati's Nandan is the same as Sekarar's Harijan farm worker. But Bharati made him a Parambarai Adimai, or what we call as a hereditary slave, in the service of a rich Brahmin landlord. When this glaring anomaly of characterizing or the need for creating Nandan's master to be a heartless Brahmin landlord bothered a lot of soft-natured, inclusive and equanimous and magnanimous Brahmins in the early 1960s. They all approached en masse Kanchi Shankaracharya, also known as Paramacharya. Many of you are very well aware of Paramacharya or Mahaperiyava, for his views and counseling. The Mahayogi Paramacharya said after some deep meditation that while he enjoyed and admired Gopalakrishna Bharati's courage, humility, as well as his absolute surrender or Sharanagati, and how Bharati effectively used Nandan's life to emphasize his prayers and pleas to be treated on par, or yes, yet another devotee earning to see the Lord of any temple, especially Chidambaranatha. Mahaperiyava also was somewhat disturbed. He too appeared unconvinced as to the compelling reason or necessity for Bharati to characterize the heartless landlord to be a selfish and villainous Brahmin who stood between the Lord and the great Bhakta, especially given the presumed spiritual education that was available and supposedly that all Brahmins had to undergo to become Brahmins, unlike the rest of other less privileged human beings. But Paramacharya did not go beyond that discussion, nor did he get into any controversy or gave any adverse opinion, nor admonish Bharati's intentions and portrayals. But he said that the treatment that Bharati may have received at the hands of some of the haughty priests or other wealthy Brahmins and the humiliation caused to him for his form, appearance and economic status. Because Bharati, as we will see later, is a very frail, not generally good looking. So the form, appearance and economic status really caused him a lot of hurt from the society around. Paramacharya wondered whether those things might have really prompted or brought out the hidden angst of Bharati to create the Brahmin landlord character as opposed to any other person as a landlord. Needless to note that Paramacharya's concern in this regard seemed very well founded when one objectively analyzes the impact of Nandanar Charitram on millions of common men and the well-meaning social reformers who were instrumental in the opening of the doors of the temples and hearts to all devotees, irrespective of caste and creed. Subramanya Bharathi and Mahatma Gandhi have to be quoted in this regard as having utilized Gopala Krishna Bharati's Nandan and the message of the opera for the common good. It's not out of place to mention how Paramacharya used to visit segregated communities of those era, such as Adivasis or Malayvasis they call, and also various slums and gypsy community. Often personally, at the end of forest land or so, to deliver food supplies when roads were cut off and incessant monsoon rains used to disrupt transportation almost annually. I was personally aware of those situations as a teenager. There is an anecdote that due to inaccessibility to a slum area which was in slush due to monsoon rains, Acharya sent an elephant which carried supplies loaded on its back. I brought this out in this context since this unneeded anomaly in the otherwise magnum opus opera is still a sticking sore point even after 150 years since creation of this opera, especially when we painfully witness popular film actors who claim to be great artists and musicians from southern India, whose parents are or were Brahmins, now deem it a fashion to convert to other religions and also actively encourage conversion from Hinduism to other religions, while concurrently demeaning and decrying the small community of Brahmins for their millennia-old customs and traditions and ritualistic observances, all of which were created primarily for the welfare of all sections of the society at large. Of course, these are the same folk who do such publicity stunts to catch the headlines and solicit popularity for pecuniary advantages by demeaning Sanatana Dharma, venerable gods and goddesses as per the scriptures, and Puranas and the incarnations of the Almighty. And they feel that it is a prerogative to write and speak against the temples and the gods and the great literary works, like even Thirupavai, which are meant to be places of worship accessible to all for peaceful purposes. This neo generation of villains go beyond even the historical atheists of the 20th and 21st centuries. Sorry, it's regrettable that I am mentioning these characters in this session. Generally, I would refrain, but we don't live in a vacuum in society and hence the reference becomes necessary. Let's now see Bharati's Nandanar story as portrayed in the Nandanar Charitram without any yellow glass or bias. Nandan is also doubled as town crier, a drummer, and a handyman for the village. He was an all-purpose assistant who was at beck and call for the entire slum or the village or the society around him. Bharati paints Nandan's insatiable passion to have a darshanam of the cosmic lord dancer of Chidambaram, Nataraja. Nandan's purity of devotion is described as unparalleled, and his unmatched intensity of desire to see Bhagavan Shiva is portrayed as profound. Bharati's portrayal is that Lord Nataraja comes to the rescue of Nandan, ensuring that his humble and innocent servant Nandan from the slum of Mel Adanur is not only allowed to visit the temple at Chidambaram, but is also received with the highest honors, Purna Kumbham, etc., and with veritable paraphernalia offered generally or mostly to the exalted, austere, spiritually learned priests and temple authorities in those days. Chekrar portrayed that Nandan, heeding to the Lord who came in his dreams, entered the fire to be purified and fit enough to enter the temple as ordained by the village elders and the bigwigs. so that Nandan can re-emerge from the fire as a sacred Brahmin to be received with honors by the rest of the Brahmins, so that he can have his Alaya Pravesham. Bharathi was appalled at reading this part because he did not like to put his Nandan through this demeaning fire ordeal or Agni Pravesham. Bharathi seemed to have loathed the very man-made social hierarchy that precluded a very large section of the society to be treated equally in front of the Lord Supreme, and wanted to remedy such a heinous man-made division through his opera. Thus, according to Bharati's opera, the Lord instead instructs his other obstinate devotees to realize their folly, to receive Nandanar with honors inside the temple. At one stroke, Bharati paints, because Bharati was well versed in Ramayana, he dictates the incident as to how the fire god Agni felt scorched when Sita Mata entered fire for ostensible purification. And Bharati wants to save, and thus he saves Nandanar from that very indignity of subjecting him to such a test for establishing his credentials to enter the sanctum of Lord Nataraja. By this open process, Bharati saves Agni too of being punished a second time. The first time being the most embarrassed Agni, absorbing Sita Mata, lamenting the compulsion imposed on him by Lord Sri Rama. An anecdote at this place is very relevant. The great biographer Uvesa writes that he was just 7 years of age when he listened to a visiting musician who came for one of the marriages or so in Tirukundram. Uvesa was visiting with his parents. The musician came from Chidambaram and he sang the Kannada Kriti, Tiyinil Mulgirar, Tirunalai Povar, Tiyinil Mulginar. Nayilum Kadayendru Nayandu Tunindidum Maya Chadalam Poki, Maraimuni Agave, Tiyinil Mulginar. பாழும் நரகத்தினில் படிந்திடும் பாவியான ஏழையின் இடத்தினில் இரக்கமுற்றதோ என்று தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். அரஹர சங்கர அம்பலவாவென்று பரிவுடன் குண்டலத்தை பிரதட்சிணமாய் வந்து தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். This is the song that the visiting musician from Chidambaram sang. தீயினில் மூழ்கினார் திருநாளை போவார், தீயினில் மூழ்கினார் திருநாளை போவார், தீயினில் மூழ்கினார் திருநாளை போவார், தீயினில் மூழ்கினார் திருநாளை போவார், தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். நாயிலும் கடையென்று நயந்து துணிந்திடும் மாயச்சடலம் போக்கி மறைமுனியாகவே தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். பாழும் நரகத்தினில் படிந்திடும் பாவியான ஏழையின் இடத்தினில் இரக்கமுற்றதோவென்று தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். அரகர சங்கர அம்பலவாவென்று அறிவுடன் குண்டலத்தை பிரதட்சிணமாய் வந்து தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். திருநாளை போவார், தீயினில் மூழ்கினார் திருநாளை போவார், தீயினில் மூழ்கினார். The fascinated 7-year-old boy, Bhuvesa, was singing and humming this so frequently that his curious father asked him who taught that song and what is that full song? What's the origin? Uvesa responded that is a Nandanar Charitar Kirtanai from the visiting musician who was coming for a wedding in Tirukundram when his father took him there to the Tirukundram family function. Then the father was so astonished at his capacity to grasp a casual singing by a visiting Vidwan. So he volunteered to teach Uvesa formal music lessons, which in turn led him to become a disciple of Gopala Bharathi in due course. That we will come to that. Although Bharathi created this song as though Nandan has already entered the fire, after doing this song, Bharathi became very troubled at the very thought process, as I said earlier, and he changed the opera as follows. He felt if chastity is hotter than fire, absolute devotion, namely Suddha Bhakti to Bhagavan, should be hotter still. Since the former is a personal virtue, the chastity is a personal virtue, and the latter is the greatest achievement for a human being to ever earn for to reach the feet of Bhagavan. This is the real courage of conviction of Bharathi, the greatest social reformer of our times. So it is therefore no surprise that he became the trailblazer to great reformers in less than a century. Bharathi makes his Nandan being offered Purna Kumbham and to be escorted to Nataraja with esteemed honors by the temple authorities and priests. Bharathi democratized the opera and spread the crusade against untouchability to every nook and corner of the silent south, especially the rural areas, which Subramanya Bharati and Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the Indian nation, followed as a national crusade till they breathed their last. As you are aware, Mahakavi Subramanya Bharati, who belonged to the time frame 1882 to 1921, he was just 39 years old when he passed away, was one of the greatest pioneers of Tamil literature and independence. Mahakavi Bharati's progressive and reformist zeal in his poems became the greatest inspiration in southern India for freedom call. Of course, as regards Gandhi, there is a fairly detailed article published by the Indian Finance Academy in their souvenir a couple of years ago on Mahatma Gandhi, which touches upon the painstaking Gandhi taking the message of Gopala Bharati and becoming the instrument for Alaya Pravesham. While we perceive this development to be the glory of Nandanar, it is Bharati's Nandan, the true devotee, who reaches the Lord by transcending caste barriers, social demarcations, and religious taboos. Through his actions, Nandanar demonstrates that a true devotee shall reach the Lord against all odds, hurdles, and insurmountable barriers. Through the way Nandan led his life, he demonstrated the power of Sharanagati or total surrender. Not only to Bhagavan, to the cause, to his faith. We already saw how Bharati was a strong believer of Sharanagati in his Gaula Raga Pancharatna Kriti we saw in the earlier session. Sharanagatamendru Nambi Vanden. In that song, he talks about Sharanagati. Bharati's Nandan was more underprivileged and outcast than our own composer Bharati himself. To understand that, we will look at Uvesa Iyer's description of his very first meeting in 1871 when he approached Bharati to become Bharati's disciple. With the official publication of Nandanar Charitaram by the then famous French collector Cissé in 1861, that's about 10 years before Uvesa meets Gopala Bharati. When the publication happened, Bharati was 50 years of age. With that publication, they already established famous Bharathi as a great composer became exalted. Nandana Charitram discourses by Bharathi became instant success stories in Nagapattinam. So there is an anecdote behind why French collector Cisse became an ardent devotee of Bharathi. Because Bharathi used to go and do discourses in Nagapattinam, many of the devotees in attendance were officers from the French collectorate of Karaikal, because it's not a much distance. From Karaikal, they will travel all the way to Nagapattinam knowing that Bharathi is coming there and is going to do Nandanar Charitram discourses and Harikatha. And throughout the night, they will be witnessing this and go back to Karaikal and attend office next morning. They were all caught sleeping at desk by the collector Cisse. And they will all come to work due to late night return. Not only sleepy, but they were not even able to work because the phenomenal discourse was irresistible and they had to travel all the way to Nagapattinam and come back to work. The curious collector Cisse found upon investigation the reason for the inefficiency in his office, and once he understood that, he became very curious as to the magic, therefore as to the context, and thus listened to the discourse himself. He goes to one of the discourses in Nagapattinam, sits down through that. Bharathi obliged the collector in Karaikal at the request of the collector to come and do the discourse there. An enchanted collector Cisse offered to first publish the Charitram at his own personal expense in the year 1861. That is how we see the very first book of Nandana Charitram having been published. The 16-year-old U.V. Swaminathan, already a music student of Ganam Krishna, expected to see a handsome hero in great pomp when he went to meet Bharathi. But he was shocked at the Asukavi, the spontaneous poet or Varakavi. Asukavi is spontaneous and Varakavi is one who could sing on any subject at the instance of thought. That was shocking to Uvesa. The frame that he saw reportedly was Bharathi. Uvesa describes the famed Bharathi as one with broad feet, wasted legs, swollen knees, broad waist, cloth above his knees, hunchback, short neck, double chin, cat's eyes, punakand, elongated head, alopecia with few strands sticking out, and a single bead of Rudraksha adorning his bony chest. And that was the appearance of Bharathi. Bharathi's poor physical frame compromised his real stature. That may be one of the reasons as to why Tyagaraja Swami asked Bharathi at the very first meeting whether he knew Bharathi, without knowing that the person who is doing prostration to him is Bharathi himself. Of course, the saint was thrilled to learn that the inelegant and puny, frail frame that fell before him was no one else than the great man he had heard of and desired for years to meet personally. Just as the dissenting scholars and fair thinkers were able to look past the less than attractive physical forms or appearance, examples are Vedavyasa, Chanakya, also known as Kautilya or Vishnugupta, Kabir Das, Socrates and Aristotle, both two of the greatest Greek philosophers, Confucius, considered paragon of Chinese sages, Plato, founder of Western political philosophy, all these great people, they were as good looking or bad looking like Bharathi. And instead, we all revere them for what they gave to humanity. People were also able to ignore Bharathi's physical appearance and instead revel in the splendor of his opera, admire the spiritual power of his crusading mission, and appreciate his solicitude for truth and excellence in every one of his compositions. Bharati's Nandanar is bound by the principles of gratitude to his master. Without his master's permission, Nandanar does not want to leave the slum or go on a pilgrimage to his ultimate abode, Chidambaram. Although it would not have been difficult for him to simply walk away from the service of his master. The rich and arrogant master uses all kinds of tactics, including sweet talk, cunning praise, threats, and intimidation. In combination or separately, every now and then he will change the tone to dissuade Nandanar from visiting Chidambaram. This is according to Bharathi. Finally, the landlord, the master, offers Nandanar a way out of the slavery. He tells him that if he completed planting the barren dirt, Tarishinilam, of 40 veli. What is 40 veli in Tamil? 1 veli equals 7 kani or 2.6 hectares, which in modern terms, 1 veli is approximately 6 3/4 of an acre, or we can say even 7 acres. So nearly 40 veli had to be planted in order for Nandanar to be released from bondage. That's say about 270 acres, or roughly between 270 to 280 acres. He would be free to go to Chidambaram once he planted it. Nandanar gives up hope and pines for the grace of Nataraja. But when in the morning he wakes up, he finds a miracle happening right in front of his eyes. He goes to see the Tarishinalam, or barren land. Overnight, through an act of divine grace, the land had not only been tilled and planted in full, but the crop had already grown almost mature to pick on the entire 270 plus acres of land. That too wasteland. While Nandanar melts in gratitude to his Supreme Lord Nataraja, his master is completely shaken. His master, meaning here the landlord, the Brahmin landlord, is completely shaken by what he had also witnessed along with Bharathi, watching these 270 acres brimming with corn or whatever it is. With utmost respect, the landlord submits himself to Nandanar, falls at his feet and seeks his pardon. Nandanar assuages the master, offers remarkable wisdom, and departs for Chidambaram. There are about 7 songs of this scene alone in Nandanar Charitam. There is a unique Dandakam in Yadukula Kambodhi. Dandakam is one of the 9 genres that Bharathi used for Nandanar Charitam. In this genre, in Yadukula Kambodhi, I will sing this song later, time permitting, because this is a very interesting genre. Even though this entire story is only a fiction of Bharati's imagination, the poetry used to narrate the story has the power to melt the hearts of readers and listeners alike. The conversation between the landlord and Bharati in this Dandakam is interesting. We will see that. Nandanar's appearance, actions, statements, and advice through Bharati's pen in Nandanar Charitram represents the life of a Jivan Mukta soaked in Vedanta and enshrined in Bhakti and Jnana Yoga. In other words, whatever Bharati desired himself to be was how Bharati portrayed in the character Nandanar. Let us see how Bharati portrays his Nandan. This song was originally sung in a Tamil pun, and the tune was known as Angusha Dhoni. This has been quoted by Professor S. Ramanathan in 1971 publication. He quotes from the 1848 publication to begin with. Satravilagiyum pillai sannidhanam maraikuram. Satravilagiyum pillai sannidhanam maraikuram. Satravilagiyum pillai Sannidhanam maraikulamé சற்றே விலகி இருப்பிள்ளாய் சந்நிதானம் மறைக்குதாக சற்றே விலகிடும் பிள்ளாய். நற்றவம் புரிய நம்மிடம், நற்றவம் புரிய நம்மிடம் திருநாளை போவார் வந்திருக்கிறார். நற்றவம் புரிய நம்மிடம் திருநாளை போவார் வந்திருக்கிறார். சற்ற விலகியிலும் பிள்ளாய். சாதி முறைமை பேசுரான் தன்னை இகழ்ந்தும் ஏசுரான். கோதில குணமுடையோன் கோபம் கொண்டால் தாழமாட்டோம். சற்றே விலகியும் பிள்ளாய். வேத குலத்தை போற்றுரான் விரும்பி விரும்பி ஏற்றுரான். பூதலத்தில் இவனை போலே புண்ணிய புருடன் ஒருவனில்லை. சற்றே விலகியும் பிள்ளாய். பக்தியில் கரை கண்டவன் அவன் பார்த்து பார்த்து உண்டவன். பக்தியில் கரை கண்டவன் அவன் பார்த்து பார்த்து உண்டவன். சித்தங்குறையில் நாமது செல்வோம் முற்றும் குறையும் தயவு செய்து. சற்றே விலகிடும் பிள்ளாய். அவன் சித்தங்குறையில் நமது செல்வம் முற்றும் குறையும் தயவு செய்து. சற்றே விலகிடும் பிள்ளாய். சன்னிதானம் மறைகிறாம். சற்றே விலகிடும் பிள்ளாய். He makes Lord Shiva talk in this song to Nandikeshwara and asks him to move a little to accommodate Nandan, who has come all the way to see him. So in other words, when Master falls at his feet and releases him, he goes to Chidambaram. In Nandanar Charitram, Bharathi follows through his poetry. And our Nandan goes to Chidambaram and then stands in front of the temple. But he has a major obstacle. The Nandi is actually showing its back. So when anybody enters, you will see in Chidambaram, the huge obstacle for anybody to have vision if you stand outside is Nandi's back. So Bharathi portrays his Nandan in somewhat of a distress, which Lord Nataraja could not handle. So what happens is Bharathi makes Lord Shiva talk. And Lord Shiva, this song has been written as though it is Lord Shiva telling Nandikeshwara to move. Bharathi drew on his tough personal life experiences for such a portrayal and hence melted the hearts of millions of Indians who could appreciate or enjoy Tamil. Bharathi used some ancient ragams as shown in the first publication in 1848 and the second publication in 1939 was by A. Rangasamulyar, which is called a Poomagal release. That also gave new names to some of these ragas. Songs with previous ragams and the replaced ones have been shown by Professor Ramanathan, who wrote about the variations in his 1971 book. He actually did a tabulation between 1848 and 1939, and the 1939 ragas are mostly followed even as of 1971 when Professor SR wrote the book. Some examples are Pittanteliya Marundu, we always sing in Sinjuridi. Pittanteliya Marundondirikudam. We do it in Sinjuridi, but in 1848 this raga was known as Chengala. And there is a raga called Kannada Piyagu for a song Viruda Janmam, but now sung in Darbar. And the famous Uttaram Taram Todi Kriti was originally sung in Deshika Todi. And the song which I taught to my class, to my disciples is Nanda Unak Indamadi Tandadarada in Mohanam. Because from 1939 the song's raga is shown as Mohanam, whereas the original raga shown in 1848 publication was Varali. Similarly, Chidambara Darsanam is today in Mukhari, it used to be Saveri. Chedi Solla is now in Dujavandi or Kedaram, people sing either one of that, but that used to be sung in a raga called Kannada Piyaku in 1848. Sivaloganathanai is a specific example where we sing in Maya Malagauda, but the ragam originally attributed to this song is Senjurity. Most of those songs are in Kirtana form with Pallavi, Anupallavi and Charanam. In fact, I am tempted to sing many of these songs, but we don't have time. So some other time we will take care of this. However, a dozen rare forms were used within those opera songs. Not necessarily Kirtana form of Pallavi, Anupallavi, Charanam, but a dozen other genres were used to represent these 90 plus 93 songs or so. Bharathi also interspersed the songs with Viruttam. It's a non-metrical poetry. We call it a Chayyul when it is not sung with music. When you sing with music, it is sung, it has got a name for its own called Viruttam. Such an encompassing renaissance of Tamilpan or Sangeetam had not been witnessed for over a millennium until Bharathi's arrival. Professor Ramanathan did great service to the Karnataka Sangeetam world by identifying each one of those 93 compositions as to their format, classification, etc. Whether it was a Kirtanai, Kaduka, Dandakam, Shindu, or Nondichindu, Kanni, Kummi, Ananda Kalipu, Irushol Alangaram, Eshal, Tukkada, Savai, Lavani. This is a rare treat and grammar of musical formats. I don't want to simply say this and walk away, because definitely you will say, why not you demonstrate some of these genre formats? I'll quickly try to do a 1 or 2 minutes to pick one item or so. So for sampling, I'll mention a few songs and the genre that they are classified under that. And all these are available in Professor Ramanathan's old publication of 1971. This genre of this song is called Kaduka or Katka. The context is the slum dwellers, according to Bharathi, they are all known as Pulayar. The Pulayar they are all singing in chorus this Kaduka or Katka. Because they are uninitiated, they don't have formal knowledge of music or even poetry. Bharati's imagination of these Pulayars singing is in some kind of a Tisra Lagu or Chatusra Egam or whatever it is, and the tune is Mohanam. It's almost like this. That is what Professor Ramanathan read. Sari ga 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 re ri ga pa ga pa pa da 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 sa da pa pa da sa sa. Simple. That's how he writes the notation. Aragara Shiva Shiva Ambalavana Tillayambala Deshikanada. Aragara Shiva Shiva Ambalavana Tillayambala Deshikanad Puramumberita Punnambalane Kariyuri Porta Karunakarane Gaga Gagariri Sariga Sadapada Dariri Sadada Bagada Bagarisa Puramumberita Punnambalane Kariyuri Porta Karunakarane Anudinam Manrulladiya Pada Vizhigurutadum Unniyam Tada. This is all the song. It's called Kaduka. This pattern is called Kaduka, sung by the slum dwellers. Bharathi introduces Nandanar with this song. Actually, in the old book, it is written as Navaroj, and subsequent books write it as Senjurity. Of course, it's a little confusing because somebody sings Navroj, we end up thinking it is Senjurity. So it's almost somewhat similar. I'm not saying the ragas are similar, the subtleties are there. This is very simple. It's actually, the genre is Tukkada. Adanuril veru vediyarkulle adimaikara parayal. Adanuril oru vediyarkulle adimaikara parayal. Sudum vadum ondru theriyadavan பரிசுத்தமான பக்தன். சூதும் வாதும் ஒன்றும் தெரியாதவன் பரிசுத்தமான பக்தன். This is Tukkada. அதனூரில் ஒரு வேதியர்க்குள்ளே அடிமைக்கார பறையல். Unfortunately, if this word parayan is used today, people will catch my throat. In those days, the word was commonly used, and that's why we are talking about the 19th century when Bharathi composed these songs. So let's not take offense to the word that here, because this is how it has been composed. This genre is known as Irisual Alankaram. This is used to describe the Vakuvadam, that is argument between Nandanar and the other Pulayers or the other people in the slum. Nandanar always talks about his passion to go to Chidambaram, and others are fed up because he says, I'm going tomorrow. He said, no, attend to your work. You will never go. You will not be permitted. So this is the kind of argument. So this is done in a tune based on Shankaraparanam. The Talam is noted as Mishram by Professor Ramanathan in his book. It is actually only 2 lines. The first line is sung in very high pitch, second line is sung in low pitch. The high pitch is all the chorus by the Pulayar or the other people, and the low pitch is Nandanar. Tillayambalamendre sollachonar Tillayambalamendre sollachonar Tillayambalamendre sollachonar. Further the response is Kallape chendru mella chonnar Kallape chendru mella chonnar. This is all the dialogue. There is only 2 lines. It's called Irisual Alankaram, the pattern used by, or the genre used by Bharathi. I narrated an incident where towards the end of Nandanar Charitram, the Brahmin landlord falls at the feet of Nandanar and seeks his pardon. But Nandanar comforts him and takes leave to Chidambaram. The genre used by Bharathi here is Dandakam, and the raga is based on Yadukula Kambodi. This is actually landlord confesses and Nandanar consoles and responds to him, and he says, don't worry. Whatever you did was not on account of you, it was bound to happen. Something like that. But still, the landlord regrets, and his regret and his confession is in the words that he had done in the Dandakam. It's actually Akshepana and Samadhanam. Ezhai paarpan naan seididum pizhai etru kollade naan இனமறியாதவன் பின்புத்திக்காரன் என்பதுவும் பொய்யோ. நான் பொய்யாகிய இந்த உலகத்தை பார்க்கும் புண்ணியவானே நான் புலையன் உங்கள் அடிமையல்லவோ புத்தி சொல்லுமையா. புத்தியுண்டு வித்தையுண்டு பக்தி கிடையாது. புலம்பினத்தால் என்ன மனமடங்காது போதம் கிடையாது. கிடைக்கும் சிதம்பர தரிசனமென்று கிருபை செய்யுமையே. நான் கீழ்குலமல்லவோ நாயினும் கடையேன் கீர்த்தி செய்வீரே. Just an argument in Yedukulam Kambodi. The last piece I am going to sing is a genre known as Savai. And the tune is based on Kedaram. And the Talam is just Kandalagu. This is after Nandana reaches Tirupungur. This is how Bharathi explained. Talam vandu veedi, balam vandu kangal. Talam vandu veedi, balam vandu kangal. Jalam vandu chorum, balam vandadengal. Talam vandu veedi, balam vandu kangal. Jalam vandu chorum, balam vandadengal. Pulam suddamachu, manam veldu pochu. Nalam kandomendre, nilam kondu nindrar. Pulam suddamachu, manam vendu pochu. Nalam kandomendre, nilam kondu nindrar. Talam vandu veedi, balam vandu kangal. So this genre is known as Savai. Nandana Charitram is a comprehensive opera with an exalted status of the model. The model Tamil opera, from different perspectives you can just call it a model. For the selection of ragams and talams, nearly a dozen genres and categories of formatting in Tamil Pan. The nice flow of the storyline and different genre following one after the other, and the songs and the genre so beautifully embedded that when you try to sing in a different genre, you will not get the hang of it. And how Bharathi whipped the society majestically by highlighting the discrimination while bringing out his angst to correct the societal ills by an effective storytelling in an exalted musical form. Bharati's opera was an instant blitz. The book, graciously published by collector Sisse, went for a reprint the next year. The songs and message spread like wildfire through the villages and towns to hundreds of thousands of young and old. Dramas and musical discourses were seen everywhere, and the songs became the delight of the connoisseur and the uninitiated, theists as well as atheists. Tamil Nadu has been the mother of musical discourses, Harikatha tradition, and suddenly Nandana Charitram became the every other program by popular demand. A social revolution has been ignited and it began spreading like a wildfire storm. Decades later, movies on the story of Nandanar were made and devoured with passion by millions. The first of these was a silent movie in 1923, and then came a talkie in 1930. Almost 5 years later, that's in 1935, the famous Ellis Duncan produced the movie Bhakta Nandanar. It was with a great star cast which included the then famous K.V. Sundarambal, also a musician, as Nandanar, and the famous Karnataka Sangita Vidwan Maharajapuram Vishwanath Iyer as the Brahmin landlord. In 1942, Gemini produced the most successful version of the opera, and S.S. Vasan started marketing for it aggressively. The movie Nandanar featured M. Dandapani Desikar, a great Tamil Isai exponent, and Karnataka Sangita Vidwan as Nandanar. Sri Desikar sang 20 out of total 31 songs in the movie. The movie sparked the uproar against untouchability in Tamil Nadu first, and it soon became a national movement. Famous political leaders and reformers jumped into the fray, and the message of Bharathi became universal. While many scholars who analyzed Bharati's life and poetry came up with superlatives, as always, a handful raised their doubts regarding whether Bharati saw in Nandanar an epitome of social wrongs, or was he simply using Nandan to express his own pangs and sufferings. Deferential scholars eventually concluded that Bharati was yet another edition of the Saint Nandanar. It would require some serious soul searching and first hand experience of each one of those gems in Nandanar Charitram to come up with a fine dissertation on his contribution to the music world, especially Karnataka Sangeetam world. Let us see some anecdotes from Bharati's life. Gopala Bharati was a saint even though he neither dressed in saffron attire nor to show off nor publicize that he was a sannyasi. Sannyasi is a mendicant who has renounced all desires. When the great musician Mahavaidyanatha Shivan, or Mahavaidyanatha as he is often known, for those of you who don't know the timing, he lived a pretty short life. He was less than 50 years old when he passed away. He was between 1844 and 1893. Shivan used to visit Chidambaram, Mahavaidyanatha Shivan. Even whether he visited Chidambaram or Mayavaram, wherever Bharati was staying, Vaidyanatha Shivan insisted on staying with Bharati in Bharati's humble residence as a mark of profound respect, while declining invitations from very rich landlords and village chieftains as a mark of respect. Bharati's Spartan lifestyle made Vaidyanatha Shivan a great admirer of Bharati. Bharati was independent, devoid of material wants or needs. Towards the later part of Bharati's life, he regularly collected 60 rupees for each performance, but left the entire amount with the host and issued some kind of a chitta, hand notes like checks on palm leaves to hosts to hand over those donations to the needy and for charities. With a few thousand rupees so collected with various hosts, Bharati started charities in Mayavaram and Chidambaram temples for food and other donations, and hoped that philanthropic patrons would continue such efforts even after his time. Bharati admired and respected noble men who did service to humanity. For instance, he called Vedanayagam Pillai a Purushameru, noblest of men. Who was Vedanayagam Pillai? He was not only a great poet, a novelist, a social worker, but he was also district munsif. District munsif Vedanayagam Pillai, ICS. He lived between 1826 and 1889, served as a civil servant for 13 years and was a great admirer of Bharati. Pillai had arranged a grand musical discourse on Nandanar Charitram by the maestro Tanjavur Krishna Bhagavatar, about whom many of you may have heard. Krishna Bhagavatar lived between 1847 and 1903. Bhagavatar was renowned as the father of Tanjavur Harikatha Bani, also known as Katha Kalakshepa. And in fact, Pillai had invited Bharathi for the program of the Harikatha. The discourse was grand and well attended, and Krishna Bhagavatar was making copious, venerable references to the eminence and excellence of Gopala Krishna Bharathi, totally unaware that Bharathi was seated right in front of him. When Pillai finally introduced the great man present in the audience, Bhagavatar felt very embarrassed and apologized for not having recognized Pillai. But Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai also apologized publicly for his own lapse in introducing Bharathi in the beginning itself so that he could avoid the embarrassment for Bhagavatar. Well, even eminence seems to require a decent frame or presentation to be recognized. Jealous Tamil poets of his time spread gossip that the greatest of Tamil scholars, Mahavidwan Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, had refused to acknowledge the Tamil proficiency of Nandanar Charitram and hence the absence of a prologue written by Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai for Nandanar Charitram. Incidentally, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, who lived between 1815 and 1876, a contemporary of Bharathi, was one of the greatest Tamil scholars who unearthed the forgotten classical Tamil literature. He was also the teacher of U.V. Swaminathan, who subsequently became a student of Bharathi. When Bharathi was questioned about having no prologue from Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, he laughed at such pettiness. He says, it was Sundaram Pillai. If he really liked it, he liked it. If he wanted to give a prologue, it's fine, but I am not bothered. But when this actual gossip reached Sundaram Pillai's ears, he wanted to put an end to that jealous propaganda. And so thereby he offered himself a prologue saying, let me do the prologue for Nandanar Charitram. That is the one I sang in the beginning introduction in the one of the three slokams or chayyur which I sang, going by the name Komevu Tiruthalai Nadaraja Peruman Thal. It was actually from Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai. And it went like this. Komevu Tiruthalai Nadaraja Peruman Thal Kudi Uinda Pumevu Peranbar Tirunalai Povardam Punidachire Pamevu Palavage Vishaipatal Inumayura Padi Yendan Yemevu Gopala Kiritina Bharatiyanam Isai Vallone. This is how Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai gave a very reverential introduction to Nandanar Charitram. And when this was announced to Bharathi saying, well, you finally got the prologue, which put an end to all the gossip and which was also given an ultimate recognition of Bharati's prowess, Bharati simply responded as usual. If he decides when to give and where to give and how to give, it will happen. He decides the timing and what to happen and when and how and to whom it should happen. That was typical Bharati. Before I conclude this final session on Gopala Krishna Bharati, I think it is my dharmic duty as a humble disciple of my father and also Paramacharya Kanchi Mahapariva, both of whom have inculcated in me a lesson, a discipline, that never hesitate to call a spade and always be honest enough to face the consequences of your words or expressions. And I am ready to do that. Three things have caused me over half a century a constant, if not a continuing angst when it comes to Gopala Krishna Bharati's life contributions and a genuine intent to portray Nandanar as a bhakta and not color the facts with pecuniary motives, casteism and political agenda. Bharati never intended to do that. But the portrayal by subsequent people have contributed to all of that. And that is the angst which I have gathered over the last 50 years or so, I continue to have the angst. It is some anxiety. The first point is, while Bharathi unintentionally christened the demanding landlord in his Nandanar Charitram to be a heartless Brahmin, as I said earlier, Bharathi never portrayed him to be a violent man. I don't think anywhere in Nandanar Charitram there is mention that the landlord, albeit he was a Brahmin, was punishing Bharathi with sticks and beat him and put him through painful punishments. The correct facts are in the 1899 publication of Nandanar Charitram has Bharathi visualized and composed the whole opera. The 1942 film Nandanar, seen by hundreds of millions of Indians over the next 70 plus years, if not more, 75 years, it's almost 80 years since that movie came. How many millions have seen God only knows. In that portrayal, it is not only a bad portrayal of Nandanar and the Charitram itself, which Bharathi carefully constructed but intentionally portrayed the movie's Brahmin landlord to be a criminal. I don't know why the producers had to really portray the Brahmin landlord to be a criminal. Bharathi only said he was a Brahmin landlord. The movie said he was a criminal, so avaricious that he beat Nandanar at every turn and subjected him to inhuman punishments, which is deplorable, thus adding additional blasphemy. If you have all watched the movie, you would see how many scenes where he used to beat Nandanar. It was absolutely uncalled for. 95% of the current day artists, musicians and scholars and common folk unfortunately go by what they see in such portrayals in audio visuals in movies and do not spend the needed time to investigate and compare the real facts. Even those like me who have placed Bharathi at the highest pedestal had become disappointed. I had been disappointed with the choice of the cast of the landlord and unwanted portrayal straying too far from sacred arts Tirutondar Purana. I don't want to belabor that issue. The second point is, as I explained in this segment earlier, Bharathi never threw Nandanar on fire. That was not his intent. He originally thought he was going to send Nandanar to do Agni Pravesham. He didn't even sing that song. But nor portrayed the Tillai Vazh Brahmanargal, Muvayiram Andanargal, to be heartless villains waiting to see the poor man Nandan burn himself in their presence by Agni Pravesham. It is the film that seemed bent on portraying the villains pressurizing Nandanar to enter the fire for purification. In fact, Bharathi uses the 3000 Tillai Vazh Brahmins or Tillai Vazh Andanar to run to Bharathi to plead that they would like to take him with Maryada to the temple. But Bharathi runs away from them, saying, Kitte neringi varavendam Swamigal, Kadil ketta perku pavam varum yanadu janmam. My janma is so bad. Such a poor man I am, sinful. You cannot even come near me. You should not. You are all very exalted people. This is what he says. In the words of Nandanar, Bharathi puts it through. Kitte neringi varavendam Swamigal. That's a response to the Brahmins who approached him with so much humility. But the Brahmins respond back to Bharathi saying, Sadiyil uyarndal enna. In the perum perumiyum illa Sadi perumai kondadale, Sankaranar arihil vandu aadaruvudan varangalindu அழைப்பாரோ சேர்ப்பாரோ. சங்கரனார் அருகில் வந்து ஆதரவுடன் வரங்கள் ஈந்து அழைப்பாரோ சேர்ப்பாரோ. Is that a requirement for Lord Shiva? That your jati is so important for him to come down and show all the love and compassion to you? Because he has already decided. He had come up in our dreams and he wants you to be respected. That's why at the instance of Lord Shiva, we have come and run to fall at your feet. But Nandana wouldn't listen. The Brahmins approached Lord Shiva, saying, hey, Nandana is not listening. We did exactly what you told us in our dreams. And they sing to Lord Shiva in desperation, saying, Unnayandri ulakattukku porul illai. This is in Kalyani Ragam. Unnayandri ulakattukku porul illai. Uttamane engadkuriya thunayum illai. Odu Nandanar thammai varacheyum. Oodin vinai thavirthavatku arucheyum. We have pleaded, ye didn't oblige. It is up to you to make Nandanar convinced about our approach so that we can do all the maryada to him. The third point I have, over the decade, some of us seem to rely more on Google, YouTube, in general internet, and for information, Wikipedia, and even many of the seriously spiritually inclined folks, they too take this internet-based digital media without a question or as sacrosanct or verified data. For example, out of the 31 songs shown in the 1942 film under Wikipedia, about 15 to 17 songs in the 1942 film of Nandanar seem to be available on YouTube for listening, of course. But even those songs, when you open those specific videos, show incorrect movie title and the year of production because there were so many Nandanars taken over several decades, and even other relevant information applicable to the 1942 film. While Papanasam Shivan and Kottamangalam Subbu as music advisors have also contributed their lyrics for some of the songs, the majority of the songs for Nandanar film and as sung by M.M. Dandapani Deshkar or by oversight, maybe, I don't know whether it is deliberate or otherwise, attributed to Sivan or Dandapani Deshkar as the composers of those songs, which you will agree is incorrect. An example is the clip that my brother showed with Dandapani Deshkar praying Piravada Varam Tharum, but in a silent form. But he used my Arabi Ganaraga Pancharatna Kriti rendition as the background for Deshikar's video. Since the 1942 movie showed the Latangi Kriti of Sivan, Piravada Varam Tharum Pimmane, actually sung by Deshikar. This is only to set the record straight. I am giving you these details. Finally, all these observations only go to prove once again that the onus is on us, the serious fans of Karnataka Sangeetam and Tamil poetry and admirers of Gopala Krishna Bharathi, to deeply investigate, at least more and more and closely, not simply rest contented that the internet has spoken and that's the final word. We are of course grateful for internet for providing all information in one place, but try and spend some time to investigate the veracity of much of the data there. Finally, to wrap up this session, first it was Andal, the divine consort of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who came as a child in Gokulam, sang to unite the underprivileged with Paramatman, because he himself took the ultimate incarnation as a cowherd to dispel all notions of all man-made social hierarchy when it comes to the service of Bhagavan. Of course, leaving aside Andal, although she is considered as one of the Alvars, the 10 Mudal Alvars we call as the Alvars that are generally considered 10 Alvars. These are the greatest Vaishnavite saints and saints, and also the Nayanmars who are exclusively focused on Lord Shiva. They all reinforce a dictum that birth does not give any overriding right over true spiritual sadhana in order to reach the lotus feet of Bhagavan. 1,000 years to date, Sri Ramanujacharya, the greatest reformer the Indian society could think of, reiterated it through his long life of 120 years, which Swami Vivekananda himself explained in his Historical Evolution of India. Swami Vivekananda, who lived between 1863 and 1902, he wrote in the book, "The movement of Shankara forced its way through its high intellectuality, but it could be of little service to the masses because of his adherence to strict caste laws, very small scope for ordinary emotion, and making Sanskrit the only vehicle of communication. Ramanuja, on the other hand, with the most practical philosophy, a great appeal to the emotions, an entire denial of birthrights before spiritual attainments, and appeals through the popular tongue Tamil, completely succeeded in bringing the masses back to the Vedic religion. As you all know, he stood on top of the temple tower in Sri Perumbudur to give the induction to all masses irrespective of caste and creed, the Ashtakshara Mantram, Om Namo Narayanaaya Namaha. Sant Jnaneshwar followed and set the place for Bharathi as the exalted status over the rest of glamour. Jnaneshwar, as you know, he was also known as Dhyaneshwar or Dhyandev or Mauli, lived only 21 years, 1275 to 1296. He was believed to be Bhagavan Vishnu himself reincarnate and was the writer of Dhyaneshwari, also called Bhavartha Deepika, a commentary on Bhagavad Gita in 9,999 Marathi verses, one short of 10,000. He broke all taboo on bringing Gita to masses. Born poor and almost abandoned, but rich in poetical, musical, intellectual and spiritual accomplishments, Gopala Krishna Bharathi rose almost from dust to sainthood. Against all odds of devotion, dedication, self-control and Sharanagati to the Lord. The legacy he has left for mankind is unparalleled. He is indeed the father of modern Tamil opera, Tamil music renaissance, and one of the principal contributors to modern-day Karnataka Sangeetam. Something that stands far above those achievements is how his Nandanar simply landed him in history books as a venerable crusader against untouchability, surpassing the angst of Bharati's predecessors. I wished I sang more and talked less in my 3 sessions, but the whole thing being touted as a legdom, I had to follow my instincts and give you more information and less of songs. I would nevertheless submit that a full session on Nandanar Charitram will be incomplete and therefore should include an appreciation of songs from Nandanar Charitram, which of course are untainted by incorrect reprints of books or movies created for commercial purposes or with a different objective. That dream will also materialize someday, God willing, by someone who is committed to truth and who is not afraid to speak truth, but all under Indian Finance Academy's auspices. Of course, God willing. Thank you all once again for your patience and patronage. I will now leave the podium to the trio Sri Venkatachalam, Srimati Revati Subramanian and Sri Shekhar Vishwanathan for conclusory remarks as well as questions if they have any. Thank you.
The 3 weeks went away in a cinch. We enjoyed it so much. We have some amazing artists in the audience today. We have my guru, Sri Neyveli Santana Gopalan. We have Srimati Savitri Jagannatha Rao, Srimati Hema Rajagopalan, Srimati Sujata Srinivasan, Sri K. Subramaniam, the flutist, and also Sri Radhakrishnan Ramachandran, flutist from San Diego. I would like to request Sri Neyveli Santana Gopalan to say a few words. He had some wonderful comments one-on-one with me, also as part of the chat group. Please, if you can please unmute yourself.
Yes, Namaste. I was listening to the whole lecture with utmost reverence, as everyone were doing. நான் வந்து நிறைய மியூசிஷியன்ஸ் இருக்கிறதுனால இதை வந்து திருப்பி நான் கேட்க போறேன் அப்படின்னு மனசுல சங்கல்பம் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கேன். அவ்வளோ அதோட அந்த ஆங்கிலத்தோட அழகுக்காக கேட்கறதா, அதுல இருந்த உண்மை தெரிச்சதே அதோட அழகுக்காக கேட்கறதா, கோபாலகிருஷ்ண பாரதி யாருங்கிறத நமக்கு தரிசனம் பண்ணி வச்ச அந்த பெருமைக்காக கேட்கறதா, அவர் பாடின சங்கீதத்தோட அந்த அமிர்தத்துவத்துக்காக கேட்கறதா புரியல. அதுல வந்து நிறைய விஷயங்கள் நானும் ஊவே சுவாமிநாதையரை பத்தி அந்த கதையெல்லாம் படிச்சிருக்கேன். அந்த ரொம்ப ஒரு டெலிகேட் சப்ஜெக்ட எவ்வளவு டிப்ளமேட்டிக்காகவும் அதே சமயத்துல ட்ரூத்ஃபுல்லாகவும் அதை கொடுத்தாருங்கிறது எல்லாமே நமக்கு ஒரு பாடம். நான் வந்து 4 லைன்ல ஒரு இன்ஸ்பிரேஷன்ல எழுதினேன், அதை சொல்லி முடிச்சுக்கிறேன். ஐ வில் லெட் அதர் ஆர்டிஸ்ட் ஆல்சோ டு எக்ஸ்பிரஸ் தேர் ஹாப்பினஸ். அதாவது, தெள்ளிய ஆங்கிலத்தில் தீந்தமிழ் இசை பாட்டால் திருமிகு பெரியோன் திருவையாறு கிருட்டினன் அள்ளியே தந்திட்ட அழகுமிகு ஆப்பராவை அனைவரும் பருகியே அகமகிழ்ந்திருந்தோமே. மிக்க நன்றி.
Thank you so much, Sri Santana Gopalan. There was a question by actually a couple of the Bharatanatyam exponents. The question was, we thought that the Nandi moved in Tirupungur. Was it actually in Chidambaram? This is a question.
It's a very relevant question. It is one of the things that has bothered me also because of conflicting books. I had said over the 3 particular series of lectures, there is an 1848 book which talks about Chidambaram Chendradum Nandanarai Noki Karugirar. There is one relevance. 1861, Collector Sisse, when he published that book, there is an pin kuripu saying Nandana Chendravudan Nandi Velagumaru Andavanidam Prarthikirar. 1899 book maintains that it was Chidambaram where Nandi moved. But subsequent to that, in 1939, 1952, they all maintain that is Tirupungur. In fact, if we go to the Tirupungur website, temple website, which is roughly near Vaidiswaran Goil, it is Sivaloganathan temple. In fact, some people claim that the song Sivaloganathanai Kandu was sung only in Tirupungur because it came on a spontaneous basis. It is true that he was actually a mendicant moving around everywhere. Some songs were sung as Thalakriti. But this Chidambaram, whether it is Chidambaram where Nandi moved, whether it is Tirupungur where Nandi moved, because Tirupungur has been lately mentioned, and our Professor Ramanathan was very silent about Nandi moving because he's a diplomat. He did not want to contradict one book from the other. Most of the storytelling, I brought it from the 1899 book. Yeah, I mean, she's right. Rather says, in Tirupungur, the Nandi is not exactly where it used to be, they moved. So thereby what happens is, everybody believes that it is Tirupungur where Nandi literally moved, anecdotally, and thereby it is on that he sang. In fact, if you remember, there was one song which I sang in a genre called Savai. In the Savai genre, which is actually a Marathi genre, Savai and Lavani are from Marathi. And that genre he introduced, Gopala Bharathi introduced. When I sang that song, Talambandu Veedi Valambandu Kangal, when that Kedaram song was sung in Savai, that was on Tirupungur. In fact, in the book it is written in the 1939 book, Tirupungur Shivani Kuritu Padal. That's how it is written. But I had to show both. At the time when I was talking about Chidambaram, because what happens is when he runs to the landlord and landlord says, now I am going to take you, and the Tellaivar Andanargal came and took him. So the sequence is Tillaivar Andanargal came from Tillai, took him to Tillai so that he could be given Purna Kumbham to enter the temple. And that is when rest of the people were complaining to Nandanar, saying if Nandi is going to show like this, how are we going to do? So there is a division in opinion. Is that Tirupangur based on the Talamandu or Valamandu or whatever it is? Or is it because Tellaivar Andanargal took Nandanar to Tillai, and that is where actually in the Alaya Pravesham happened first. So that question, I wish I had a perfect answer for that. But in all these things which are 150 years old, if I say 4 times the same answer, somebody may say, okay, Mama has said, so it may be correct. I don't want to do that mistake. I already said it in one of the sessions that if somebody lies 10 times, it becomes truth. I don't want to either say it is Tirupungur or Chidambaram, but I salute that artist who raised the question. It's a fantastic question. Do I have the correct answer? I don't have, because I sang the Tirupungur version of the Talamandu. At the same time, I have to talk about the 1899 book, which mentioned about Chidambaram வாழ்த்தில்லை வாழ் அந்தணர்களை அந்தணர்கள் நந்தனை கூப்பிட்டு கொண்டு போகும்போது நடந்த விதி. That is the way it is written. In fact, that is a book available, digital book available, the 1899, not in reprint or anything else. If somebody is interested, it's almost like in a manuscript form. I can share with them. Thank you. I hope I am somewhat plausible here, but I don't have exactly the correct answer. But Nandi Velahinar, and Matu Nichyo.
Thank you so much. I would like to read something Srimati Savitri Jagannatha Rao has written. She said, very moving and great experience to listen to this wonderful Vagayakara, Sri Gopala Bharathi, thanking the team of Indian Finance Committee members to have organized these 3 parts of Lectem. Please organize a full session of hearing the compositions by Sir. So I think it's a wonderful suggestion. I am sure Sri Venkatachalam and Sri Shekhar would second that and third that. So if you would like to say anything, Sri Venkatachalam, please do so, and then I'll hand it over to Sri Shekhar.
Yes, I was just thinking of that. So since so many have enacted it, and we have questions about whether the version is the right one or not, why not let our dear Sri Krishnan direct a show for Indian Finance Academy? You not only sing, but enact Nandana Charitram, and let the students suffer, work hard, produce something like that. That is good sadhana. Otherwise, it's all paid, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we have an excellent resource here. So, and we rightly called this as Indian Fine Arts Academy. So it includes not only music, dance, but it includes drama. This is an excellent way to bring together dancers and musicians, singers, those who are good in languages under the direction of Sri Krishna, to have something like that done. Hopefully, COVID will go away. And this may be a 5-year, 10-year project, so be it. I second this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to request Dr. Shekhar Vishwanathan to please say the vote of thanks and finish up, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of Indian Finance Academy, I would like to thank Sri Sangita Acharya Krishnan sir for putting together a wonderful program, a 3-part series. Each one is about 1 hour and 15 minutes. But you can imagine the amount of work that has gone on to identify and precisely research each one of these areas, as a result of which, what a fantastic compilation of information put together on 3 different video segments on 3 different days. It is simply unimaginable. And very many of the legdams we have never had such amount of what I call as a depth of information. as was pointed out by several other people here. And I cannot thank, on behalf of all assembled here and the Board of Indian Fine Arts, Sri Sangita Acharya Sri Krishnan sir and Mami, for putting together a wonderful program. By looking at each one of these events, or I should say program, you can imagine both the songs as well as the context in which they are explained, etc. It wouldn't be possible if it's not for the enormous amount of work by Sri Lakshmi Narasimhan. I mean, by each frame by frame, you can imagine the appropriate type of, let's say, pictures, appropriate type of the scenes, and the context. Everything was so well orchestrated, actually, just like a movie. And I didn't think there was not even a single, let's say, for example, flop, or I should say, misstep in the process. And again, our sincere thanks to Sri Lakshmi Narasimhan for putting together such a fantastic program. Those of you who may not know, each one of these program, it probably took well more than 50 hours of compilation of videos, information collectively assembled and choreographed, and most importantly, sewn together to make sure they literally represent the topic of the particular evening. And that was done so well by both Sri Krishnan sir and Sri Lakshmi Narasimhan, and of course with Mami's help, which I'm sure that she was quite involved in every one of these aspects. And as Neyveli sir, nicely mentioned in the process, how beautiful. Of course, we all know Krishnan sir is a fantastic orator. He can speak in Tamil, English, Hindi, Telugu so well, because I have physically witnessed for the last 15 plus years the process. But such a vast topic, as you can imagine, he can talk equally the same way by being in presence of all of us in the process. But this was nicely done in such a way that we can get to enjoy this for years to come, as was pointed out by Sri Neyveli sir, that we have to watch the video again and again and digest all the valuable lessons so that we know that we can get to identify the various intricacies, and of course, obviously, the fantastic poet of Gopala Krishna Bharathi for his contribution to the literature. Once again, on behalf of Indian Fine Arts Academy, I want to thank each and every one of you for making this possible. I know that we would have loved to have a lot more people. The recordings are available. It will be made available through our YouTube, Indian Fine Arts YouTube channel, and it'll be circulated very shortly so that you can get to share with everybody in the process. Let me hand it over to Sri Krishnan sir for a concluding remarks.
I would like to only say 2 minutes, and I echo Dr. Shekhar Viswanathan's sentiments. But this is not from an older brother to a younger brother, because neither Narasimhan nor me, we are generally not mushy people trying to promote children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, etc. He is also, to some extent, I will really get upset at him. He doesn't want his name to be mentioned either on the video or even mentioned otherwise. That is the kind of personality he is. One thing I can say is he has been a taskmaster. If I had only talked this series and there were no visuals or audio visuals or the sewing done by him, this would have been hardly 10% or 20% acceptable, because after 10 minutes of talk on a frame, I have no patience, because then we turn around to take a cup of coffee or walk around, mute it, put a video and go. But the fact that at least 49 people tuned in the beginning, and 75 minutes there is still 49 people on Zoom, and I'm sure he followed an harmonium. Everything I sang, I gave it to him. I just simply gave it to him, all this. And then he starts thinking about every frame. For the final edit, he shows, edit meaning he wants to show. Then when I say remarkably done, he said, that's not why I called you. I wanted to pick holes in it. whether I'm saying the right thing, don't pump me. Just tell me, am I all right? That is humility. And plus the amount of knowledge, the amount of intellect he has, amount of information he has gathered. One word I say and then leave it. If I say collector say, he goes to Karaikal collector's office of that era of 1861 and gets a picture of that. So that much of obsession he has to come to the truth of it. Couple of times he used to say, well, you are very harsh, but I cannot question. You go ahead. I will try to milden it by putting some visuals, because when you talk, you don't know. Sometimes you can be very harsh. I said at 75, I cannot change. As Sri Santana Gopalan said, unfortunately, two people have told me, live by truth and truthfully live. If you cannot, one janma waste. Paramacharya adan chona, enga appa adan chona. So I have to really thank them for giving me at least the ability to openly say that, and for Perival like you people tolerating me for saying that for the last 15 years. I have never hesitated to call a spade a spade. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please like our Facebook page, Indian Finance, and on our YouTube channel, we should have the complete uninterrupted, recording of this event as well. When I think of both the Sri Krishnan and Sri Narasimhan, I'm reminded of what famous actor Denzel Washington once said. At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you have accomplished. It's about who you have lifted up, who you have made better. It's about what you have given back. I think they have really shown us, how to give back. Giving money is very easy. The amount of time, love, effort, and hard work they have put into this, I think we are indebted to them forever. And we need to have more in-depth sessions like this, and we absolutely will. Thank you all so much for participating. Please spread the word, and we really appreciate these opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And our next event is on September 11th, as well as September 12th morning. There are two sessions, and September 11th is the musings, or music on musings, and this is by Pandit Karthik Sheshatri on the Hindustani music. And on September 12th, we have Akkarai Sisters. That's on the morning, Sunday morning, and India time will be Sunday evening. The information will be forthcoming shortly. Thank you so much. Good night.
God bless you. Good night.
Thank you.